In 2007, if you owned a single piece of paper called a stock share in the famous department store JCPenney, it was worth $85. It was one of the most successful stores in American history. But just 13 years later, in 2020, that exact same piece of paper wasn't even worth the price of a gumball. It was trading for less than 20 cents. One of America's biggest retail giants, a company that once operated over 2,000 stores and employed 200,000 workers, had completely run out of money. How did a business doing billions of dollars in sales end up completely broke? It turns out their downfall wasn't caused by a slow decline. It was accelerated by a single catastrophic mistake made inside the corporate boardroom by a man hired from Apple. Welcome back to the Boardroom Guy. Today, we are dissecting the rise, the tragic collapse, and the strange survival of JCPenney. To understand how JCPenney became a giant, we have to go back to the year 1875. That is when a boy named James Cash Penney was born. James had a very strict upbringing. When he was just 8 years old, his father told him he had to start earning his own money to buy his own clothes. This taught young James a very simple lesson early in life. If you want something, you have to work hard for it. When James grew up, he moved out west to Wyoming for his health. He started working as a regular clerk at a small chain of dry goods shops called the Golden Rule Stores. The owners ran the business using a very basic concept from the Bible: treat other people exactly the way you want to be treated. James loved this philosophy. He believed that if you gave regular, working-class people good quality items at fair, honest prices, they would stay loyal to you forever. In 1902, James saved up his money, took out a small loan, and opened his very own Golden Rule store in a tiny mining town called Kemmerer, Wyoming. James did things differently. He didn't look at his employees as just workers. He called them partners or associates. He was the first major business owner to do this. Even better, he shared the store's profits with his workers and allowed his managers to own a piece of the shops they ran. The plan worked perfectly. By 1913, James had 34 stores. He decided to buy out his partners and rename the entire company after himself, JCPenney. Over the next few decades, the company grew like crazy. Even when the Great Depression hit in the 1930s and thousands of businesses shut down, JCPenney survived. Why? Because cash-strapped families knew they could count on them for cheap, reliable goods. Fun fact, in 1940, a young man named Sam Walton got his very first job in retail, working as a regular associate at a JCPenney store in Iowa. He would later take everything he learned there to create a tiny competitor you might have heard of called Walmart. By the 1950s and 60s, a massive change was happening in America. Millions of families were buying cars and moving away from small downtowns into the new suburbs. JCPenney left behind their small Main Street shops and moved directly into the brand new invention of the era, the suburban shopping mall.
We're all set for our biggest sale of the year, the JCPenney Day sale, with savings on all Woodmere clothing. Save on this suit, these blazers. Save on all Woodmere shirts and ties.
And look, I'll show you gold and more, 25 to 50% off. There's a sale on track and court warm-ups, too. And 25% off all swimwear.
It's the JCPenney Day sale.
You're looking smarter than ever, JCPenney.
They also launched a secret weapon to compete with their biggest rival, Sears, their iconic catalog business. It was a giant, 1,000-page booklet mailed directly to people's homes, affectionately nicknamed the Big Book. For millions of middle-class Americans, flipping through the JCPenney catalog to order clothes, appliances, or Christmas toys was a magical household tradition. When James Cash Penney died in 1971 at the age of 95, he left behind an absolute empire. By 1973, JCPenney had over 2,000 massive stores across the country, pulling in billions of dollars every single year. They were the undisputed kings of the American mall. But as the world entered the late 1990s and 2000s, the retail landscape began to split, and JCPenney found itself caught in a terrible trap. Think of it like being stuck in the middle seat of a crowded airplane. On the bottom end, hyper-efficient discount stores like Walmart and Target were offering rock-bottom prices that JCPenney couldn't match. On the top end, upscale department stores like Macy's and Nordstrom were capturing the wealthier fashion shoppers. And to make matters worse, a tiny online website called Amazon was growing rapidly, changing how people shopped forever.
Suddenly, the giant suburban malls that made JCPenney rich were beginning to die. People just weren't visiting them anymore. JCPenney tried to fight back. They made a brilliant deal with the luxury makeup brand Sephora to build mini beauty shops inside their stores. This successfully brought younger shoppers through the doors. But the structural damage was already done. In 2009, they officially stopped printing their famous catalog. Then, the painful 2008 global financial crisis hit. JCPenney's core customers, hard-working middle-class families, were hit the hardest by the recession. Sales began dropping by billions of dollars. 2010 would mark the absolute last year the company would ever make a single dollar in profit. The boardroom was panicking. Investors demanded a radical change. And that is when they made the call that would seal their fate. In 2011, a billionaire Wall Street investor named Bill Ackman bought a huge chunk of JCPenney. He convinced the board that they needed a superstar leader to completely reinvent the brand, a Steve Jobs of retail. They found their man at Apple. His name was Ron Johnson, the retail genius who had created the world-famous, ultra-profitable Apple stores. JCPenney gave him a massive $52 million bonus just to sign the contract and take the job.
In January 2012, Ron Johnson announced a plan called Fair and Square. He believed that customers were tired of the traditional retail game. In his eyes, marking up a sweater to $60 just to offer a coupon that brings it down to $30 was a cheap trick. So, without running any market tests, Ron eliminated all coupons, all clearance sales, and all discount tags overnight. He announced that from now on, the store would just offer one low, honest price every day. It sounded simple and logical inside a corporate boardroom, but Ron Johnson forgot one fundamental rule about his specific shoppers. JCPenney customers loved the thrill of the hunt. They loved clipping coupons and seeing exactly how many dollars they saved at the bottom of their receipts. In fact, nearly 70% of all purchases at the store involved a coupon. When regular families walked into the new stores, they felt like their favorite discounts were stolen from them. While customers walked away in confusion, Ron Johnson remained completely out of touch, running the Texas-based company while commuting every single week from his home in California via a private jet.
The results were a total bloodbath.
During the critical 2012 holiday shopping season, sales dropped by a staggering 32%. Wall Street analysts called it the worst single quarter in the history of retail. In just 12 months, Ron Johnson's strategy caused JCPenney to lose an unbelievable $1.2 billion in cash. After just 17 months on the job, the board fired Ron Johnson. They quickly brought back their old management team and immediately put the coupons and sales back on the racks. But the damage was permanent. The loyal suburban moms had already left, and they were never coming back. For the rest of the 2010s, JCPenney slowly bled cash, losing money every single year. They closed hundreds of stores trying to survive. Then, in 2020, the final blow arrived: the global pandemic. With all in-store shopping temporarily banned, the company was trapped with $5 billion in debt and zero income. On May 15, 2020, after 118 years in business, JCPenney officially declared bankruptcy. As tens of thousands of regular, everyday workers were sent home without pay, a massive scandal erupted inside the boardroom. It was discovered that right before filing for bankruptcy, top executives quietly handed themselves nearly $10 million in cash bonuses. It was a deeply greedy image that shattered what was left of the company's public reputation. At this point, you would expect JCPenney to completely disappear forever, just like Toys R Us or Sears. But here is the ultimate plot twist. Two of the biggest mall owners in America stepped forward and bought the bankrupt company out of court for hundreds of millions of dollars. Why would real estate companies buy a dying department store? Because they desperately needed JCPenney to stay alive. In the retail world, JCPenney acts as an anchor tenant, the giant store at the end of the mall that draws in the crowds. If the anchor tenant goes completely dark, the legal contracts of the smaller mall shops allow them to break their leases and leave too. The mall owners bought JCPenney simply to save their own malls from collapsing. By 2025, JCPenney was quietly merged into a new massive retail group alongside other legacy brands. Today, they operate around 600 stores. They are a much smaller, quieter version of the retail giant they used to be.
The story of JCPenney leaves the boardroom with one powerful lesson. It doesn't matter how successful you are, how long you've been around, or how many billions of dollars you have in the bank. If you sit inside an executive boardroom and make radical decisions without listening to, testing, or respecting your core customers, you can destroy a century-old empire in a matter of months. That is all for today's breakdown from The Boardroom Guy. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below about your favorite memory of shopping at the mall, and we will see you inside the next boardroom meeting.